So far, you learned about the conditions of supply, efficiency, and cost. And you've also looked at business spending on equipment and household or consumer spending on key items such as automobiles and residential construction. In this module, we're going to examine the Federal Reserve, or the Fed as it's often known, which is our nation's central bank. And the crucial role, as far as we're concerned, for the Fed is how its actions affect demand, affect total demand, aggregate demand, total spending by households or consumers on automobiles and residential construction, and how it affects business decisions to invest in plant, equipment, and inventory. Now, as you might imagine, just thinking about this intuitively, the Fed's decisions are relayed to the markets via the interest rates. Clearly, if interest rates fall, it makes borrowing and spending easy, and that naturally stimulates demand. If interest rates rise, if borrowing is more difficult, access to credit harder to get, spending falls off. Now, the Fed's objectives have changed over time. Once upon a time, right after World War II, and clear up until the end of the 1970s, the Federal Reserve's main objective was to stimulate demand, to try to boost spending as rapidly as possible in the long run, in order to get the economy to grow as rapidly as possible. So the Fed pursued what is known as easy policies in the main. Expansionary policies in the main. Not always, but in general. And the consequence was, as you might expect, as demand rose over time, as spending rose over time, so did inflation. By the late 1970s, the rate of inflation was intolerable. As a consequence, the Fed changed its approach, changed its objectives, and since the early 1980s, the Federal Reserve has tried to keep inflation low. So instead of stimulating demand in the main, it's done the opposite. It's tried to keep the rate of spending from growing so rapidly, it'll boost prices up quickly. So the Fed has been far more conservative and emphasized a much less expansionary approach. And so you can balance these two approaches. So you can think of, perhaps 35 years following World War II, in which the Federal Reserve pursued an expansionary policy, and now, since today is April 27th, 2007, about 27 years since the Fed has begun to err on the side of caution and try to keep inflation in check. Now, we'll explore all of these issues in more detail as the module progresses, and of course, of interest to you, the module will show you how you can keep track of what the Federal Reserve is doing in order to better understand its approach to current economic conditions. We'll move forward.